Welcome, everyone. We are starting a new era here in Factually Football. Andrew and I have officially made the decision to go streaming. We are still looking at different ways to get it out there into the podcast world of Spotify and Apple iTunes, but wanted to follow one of our cohorts, Cody, in just going full on StreamYard. It's a great platform for us, and it's something that we can go to our YouTube channel, which is newer for us, as well as our Facebook channel and our Twitter. So hopefully you all are listening. Hopefully you all will follow us over here, and excited to talk some AFC South football this week. Andrew, anything for the folks before we get rolling?
Yeah, for a lot of fans, it's the Ellinger era, or at least the start of the Ellinger era. Starting Sunday against the Washington Commanders. I think for many people, fans especially, they had this game circled. Back when the schedule was released, it was the Carson Wentz returning to Indianapolis, and the comments that Irsay made about Wentz not being the right fit and all these things, um, and now it's turned into Sam Ellinger versus Taylor Heineke. So grab your popcorn.
As we're wont to do on this one, I'm gonna save that game for last because we always have so much to talk about, even more so this week. But just kind of some generalized NFL notes for those of you that follow the league. Obviously, November 1st is the trade deadline. It is coming up. It is fast approaching. There is a lot of talk out there. Are the Colts buyers? Are they sellers? Are other teams buyers and sellers? Um, you know, I think traditionally the Colts haven't made a ton of trades, especially around this time. But if they're going to do anything, I think they're sellers. And if they are, they're obviously not pulling the trigger. They're just getting the best value here. Any thoughts on that, Andrew, before we get into some of the games?
Yeah, to be completely truthful, I haven't seen anything that suggests they're either buyers or sellers. But if I'm the Colts, if I'm Chris Ballard, and Frank Reich, I'm definitely selling at the trade deadline. I mean, you have some nice pieces. I think that can still bring some okay value, maybe some mid round picks, 2, 3, 4. Um, that's just my personal opinion. I think, and I think when you look at the quarterback class come April, you're going to need all the ammo you can get to go and get a quarterback, which we'll get into this more later. But I think that's partially why they made the move at Ellinger. Internally, obviously, they're speaking different. They still think they can make the playoffs and whatnot. But again, I feel like this move sort of indicates that they're looking maybe one eye towards the future.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of jumping right into a game around quarterbacks, two quarterbacks going in, we'll call it opposite directions in fairness. The first AFC South game on the docket this week is the Denver Broncos and Jacksonville live from London. Weird, it's going to be raining in London this week, FYI. So game kicks off 9:30 tomorrow morning. Again, teams going opposite ways. You've got the Russell Wilson saga going on, and that's probably unfair to Russell because I think he's a great human being. But just flat out, they're just not performing there. Javonte Williams injury. Barrett Browning is now out this week. Ronald Darby's out this week. Garrett Bowles is out this week. Cameron Fleming is out this week. Cade Stearns, the backup safety, is out this week. And Randy Gregory is out this week. So all of that going against a younger Jacksonville team who made some moves themselves this week with James Robinson departing for New York. Obviously, the Breece Hall injury for the Jets was something they wanted to address and make sure that Michael Carter never got 100% of the carries. So they traded for James Robinson, which now means this is Travis Etienne's backfield. I'm projecting that you're going to see a little bit of Snoop Connor as well, another young fella in the backfield. But, to me, this is, again, two teams opposite directions. Jacksonville's favored by a slight margin. Neither team has really performed to a level that I feel definitively about either one here. If I'm going to say what's going to make the difference, I think it's going to be the scrambling ability of Trevor Lawrence here. Gets it done, and I think Jacksonville wins kind of an ugly game in London. people will be happy they didn't wake up if they do not wake up to this. But I'm thinking like 2017 type of win for Jacksonville this week. Any thoughts on this one, Andrew?
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup for sure. I mean, you look at both records: Jacksonville 2-5, Denver 2-5. They both, as you have mentioned, have really underperformed, especially the Broncos. Russell Wilson, 32 years old. I'm not ready to say that he's washed or that he's fallen off of a cliff. I want to see him with a competent head coach, and I'm sorry, Nathaniel Hackett isn't that. His offense is very, very predictable. It's very vanilla, and it's been that way since the start of the season. And Denver's defense, Adam, when you look at it by the numbers, is top 5 in the NFL in almost every major statistical category. So they're getting it done defensively. It's the offense that can't play complementary football. I do like Jacksonville. I think Trevor Lawrence, his ability, like you were mentioning, to get outside the pocket, create plays off script, is going to be big. I will say, just to kind of as a side note, I wasn't a fan of the James Robinson trade for Jacksonville. I thought you had a really nice 1-2 punch with Robinson and Travis Etienne, and now Etienne, who admittedly is a little undersized, and nothing personal, but typically running backs that are undersized, they have a maybe harder time establishing themselves in the league. And again, Etienne can play. He's a great player, but I just think that what you had in Robinson and Etienne was unique, and I felt like the utilization of both of those players over the last couple of weeks was really well done by Doug Peterson. But with that being said, I'm going to go Jacksonville. I like Jacksonville's offense. Trevor Lawrence, I think, has been sacked only 10 or plus times this season. It hasn't been very much. Their running game's been pretty kind of steady. They've been able to run the ball pretty well most of the time this season. And I think Trevor Lawrence, nobody's really talking about it because they're 2-5. A lot of their losses have been close losses, one possession losses, and Trevor Lawrence has looked really, really strong this season. So, and I don't trust the Broncos offense to score more than 10 points or 13 points. Until they show me otherwise, I'm not picking Denver. Give me Jacksonville. I like it to be low scoring too. I'm going to go 24-13 Jacksonville.
Yeah, and you were right on Trevor Lawrence. It's 10 total sacks on the year. So good call on that one. The next game, it's kind of a weird week for the AFC South. In fairness, we've got 2 games in the 4:00 slot this week. So the next game that we'll talk about is the Titans and Texans. I don't know if we can technically say these are 2 teams going in the opposite directions, because that would infer that we thought at some point that Houston was on the upward trend. Look, Tennessee's finding a way to win. I just can't put it any other way than that. You all know, if you've listened to our podcast, I am not even remotely high on Tennessee whatsoever this week, or this year whatsoever. But the reality is they're finding ways to get it done. No real receiver. Traylon Burks is on the IR. Kyle Phillips, the other rookie's on IR. So literally you're doing it with Cody Hollister, Nick Westbrook-Akina, and Robert Woods at receiver, and people still can't find a way to shut down Derrick Henry with an offensive line that flat out hasn't graded that well. So all that to be said, I think that at some point Houston's going to get better. I think if there's a bright spot in their season this year, it's been the addition of Dameon Pierce. I think he's a great running back, and I think he fits really well into this division that's been running back heavy now for a while. But you put him in there with Henry and Taylor at some point, and you've got a pretty nasty trio of running backs in a division that, for some reason just can't ever seem to find the right passer all of a sudden. So give me Tennessee in this one. I don't think it's close. I think, Davis Mills does his standard Davis Mills thing, which is does his best to keep his team in it, but he just flat out doesn't have the weapons. You've got Philip Dorsett, Brandon Cooks, Chris Moore, and Jordan Akins at tight end. I mean, a good year as well from Laramie Tunzel. and the young kid Titus Howard at the tackles, but I just think they've got too far to go, and they don't have enough pressure to take advantage of that bad Tennessee line. Your thoughts on that one, Andrew?
You're going to be shocked, but I'm going to take Houston. I'm going to take the upset. And here's why. I think Davis Mills has played fairly well this season. I think Pep Hamilton has done an excellent job helping develop the young quarterback. I like Dameon Pierce a lot. And their weapons, they're okay. Brandon Cooks, he can play. Nico Collins has had, I think, a pretty decent season. And Houston, outside, I think, of last week's game against Las Vegas, most of their games, I think, have been pretty close. I mean, I can't recall watching a Houston game, and maybe it's escaping me, where they're getting blown out by 14 or plus points. It's at home for Houston. It's a game that I think their defense can take advantage of the lack of weapons on the other side with Tennessee. It's obviously you're going to have to stop Derrick Henry. And if Derrick Henry takes over like he has in previous meetings against these or with these teams, I beg your pardon, then it's going to be a long day for Houston. I think it's going to be low scoring, and I think Houston is going to pull it out. I think I'm going to go 20-17 Houston. And those of you that are listening or maybe listening later may think I'm crazy. That's okay. I'm not high on Tennessee, Adam. They beat the Colts 19-10 last week, and they didn't score a single offensive touchdown. Granted, they came into that game scoring on like 93% of their red zone trips, and the Colts held them to 3 field goals. The only touchdown they scored that game was the god-awful pick six that Matt Ryan had. Outside of Derrick Henry, it's the Derrick Henry and Robert Woods show. And I think if you can take those two away, and I think you line up Derek Stingley, the rookie from LSU, on Robert Woods, and Stingley's been, I think, exceptional this season. Do their other weapons really scare you? Cody Hollister, he had 2 catches last week. The high in terms of receiving for Tennessee last week was Austin Hooper with 3 receptions for 40-something yards, I believe, including that crazy catch on his back shoulder or whatever that was after the potential breakup from Rodney McLeod. That was a crazy catch. I digress. My point is Tennessee doesn't have the weapons. I think if you're Houston, I think you almost dare Tennessee to throw. And here's another storyline to keep an eye on, Adam. And I don't know, maybe you've seen something and you can update me on this. But I thought that Ryan Tannehill was questionable and Malik Willis could potentially get the start. And I think you're looking at a very, very, very different game plan with Willis in there as opposed to Ryan Tannehill. I think, something in my gut tells me that Houston is going to find a way to pull this out. And I think that Tennessee, they're 4-3, as you mentioned. They find ways to win. They're really, really well coached. They're really well disciplined. They're a really good football team in that aspect. I just don't trust them. The way that they're winning games, though, is not sustainable, I guess is my point. You're not going to be able to win games by scoring 19 points a game and kicking field goals in the red zone. You've got to find your way into the end zone. And I've kind of gone on and on, so apologies, but I'm going to go Houston 20-17.
Yeah, I haven't seen any definitive on Ryan Tannehill yet. I actually think it almost makes them a better team if Tannehill's not in. In fairness, I think Tannehill's run his course, and I think, we've talked about it on this show all year. In fairness, so yeah, I think he's run his course for sure. All right, listeners, you've been waiting a little bit. Last game in the AFC South of the week. Colts and Commanders, as Andrew alluded to, as we started this bad boy, it was going to be the is Matt Ryan better than Carson Wentz show. It is now the is Sam Ehlinger your next answer, and is Taylor Heineke almost as good as Carson Wentz? Going into this game and looking at it, I question a few things. Obviously, I question both teams and the way that they look right now. The Colts just seem to be ping-ponging back and forth. they lose a game last week in which they don't give up an offensive touchdown, but still find a way to lose. The offense has been abysmal. For some ungodly reason, they have the best rusher in the league, yet they don't ever use him. And then on the flip side, I question if we would even be talking about Washington if they hadn't beat Green Bay last week. This is a team that's got 3 wins and 4 losses, but their 3 wins have come against the Bears in a 12-7 real stunner, and early against Jacksonville at 28-22 at home. So I don't think that Washington is a juggernaut, obviously. They've got some injury concerns this week as well. As we talked about, Carson Wentz is out. Keep an eye on that, Colts fans. If he does play in a few weeks, that's good for us. That means we could possibly get a second-round pick instead of a third-round pick. Yes, that is where we're at in our football season. They've also got Phidarian Mathis out at the D tackle spot. There's some conversations about the young Tariq Castro-Fields. I also saw William Jackson did not practice, which is a big loss, especially for the Colts receiving core. I think this move for me signals a few things. We were talking about it before we came on air here. It signals the hot seat that Frank Reich may be on or should be on, because this decision, I believe, was made well above Frank Reich and well above Chris Ballard. It also signals the fact that somebody's going, hey, maybe we don't need a quarterback to throw the ball for 300 yards a game because we have this guy in the backfield named Jonathan Taylor, who last week averaged 6 yards per carry but only touched the ball 10 times. I think that's what you're going to see this week. I think you're going to see a heavy dose of Jonathan Taylor. I think if William Jackson is out, you're going to see them attempt to take advantage of that a little bit. And I think you're going to see a lot more Paris Campbell again this week. Guy coming off 10 and 11 targets back-to-back weeks. I don't think Washington scares you. Ellinger is going to want to get the ball out quick. He is more mobile, which causes more problems. But he doesn't have the arm strength to fling it downfield and hit your, deep bombs to Alec Pierce that we've seen, or deeper post routes to Michael Pittman. I think you're going to be very tight end, running back, and slot receiver heavy this week from a team performance. And then, big shout out to the defense. The defense, to me, has been doing it all year. I can't say that they've actually lost us a single game yet, in my opinion. So they've been doing well. I think if they play the same way that they have been playing, I think this is a game you maybe get the win here. I just don't think Washington is that good, and until they beat a team that isn't at a mediocre or sub 500 record, I just don't know that I see them as a threat. What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, I again, kind of as I alluded to earlier, it's the Ellinger era, or at least the start of the Ellinger era. This feels like one eye towards the future kind of move, as I mentioned earlier. I firmly believe that. That's just pure speculation. But I think that the Colts are in a position where you've now failed at the quarterback position twice with Carson Wentz and Matt Ryan trades. And you've failed in a variety of respects. You failed in that Carson Wentz collapsed at the end, despite his numbers looking pretty decent. And this year with Matt Ryan, you failed to provide what you said you were going to provide. You sold him on the league's best running game and one of the league's best offensive lines, and you've given him neither. And it's now you find yourselves, the Colts do, in a situation where you're kind of in scramble mode. And so you promote Ellinger to the one. Matt Ryan, as we know, has a grade 2 shoulder separation. But the Colts also came out and said that, regardless of whether or not Ryan was injured, he was going to be benched anyway, which that just, I'll admit I was a little surprised. I think a lot of people were, because Frank Reich the day before was, saying Matt Ryan's our quarterback. We're 3-3-1. We're 3-3-1. And now they find themselves, with Ellinger at the helm. And it'll be interesting. I think it opens up the playbook, kind of, as you mentioned, a little bit more with Ellinger's mobility. I think it maybe opens up some more big runs for Jonathan Taylor, given Ellinger's threat to get outside the pocket. As you mentioned, arm strength isn't really there, and we mentioned this off air. Adam, going against number ones in this league is vastly different than going against 2 and 3 and 4s. And I want to be abundantly clear. I'm not saying that Ehlinger doesn't deserve a shot. I'm not saying that he's not a good quarterback. I'm saying that what we saw in the preseason could potentially be an outlier. I think that you're putting a lot on the shoulders of a 6th round pick, who, I mean, let's be honest, he was taken in the 6th round for a reason. And again, that's not a shot at Ehlinger as a human being. People glow or speak glowingly about Ehlinger. He's a fantastic person and a great leader. But I think we should pump the brakes on Ehlinger as the next fill-in late-round quarterback here that ultimately becomes your franchise starter for 20 years. I think the Colts view him as more of a backup player, more of a backup quarterback, maybe a solid backup quarterback, but I don't think Ehlinger is going to be the long-term answer for Indianapolis. I think this game's really interesting, Adam. It's you kind of, I guess for the Colts, I mean, a lot of people internally believe that they can still make the playoffs. And I mean, defensively, as you mentioned, they've been, I think, really, 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 really phenomenal this season. Have the Colts. I mean, we mentioned it earlier. They didn't give up a single offensive touchdown, and the Colts still found a way to lose, as they often do. But offensively, I think I agree with you. I think it's heavy dosage of Taylor and Heineke and the tight ends. I think you obviously have to get Pittman and Pierce and Campbell involved. They all three of them have come up in a big way for you this season. And I think
Taylor and Hines, by the way, not Heineke.
Say again.
You said Taylor and Heineke. You mean Taylor and Hines?
Taylor and Hines. Excuse me. Yes, I'm sorry.
Too many Taylors in this game.
Yeah. Apologies. Yeah, no, Taylor and Hines and the tight ends. And obviously, like I said, you have to get Pittman and Pierce and Campbell involved because they've played well when given a chance. And listen, I'm just as a lot of people that watch the Colts on offense as confused as to how they have these kind of offensive weapons at their disposal, and they either underutilize them or they end up scoring 10, 17 points a game. Let's not act like the cupboard's bare, ladies and gentlemen. Let's not act like the Colts don't have the former leading rusher in the league by more than 500 yards, I might add, last season. Michael Pittman is a star. Alec Pierce is coming into his own, and tight ends have been performed really, really well, especially Jelani Woods. He's got 3 touchdowns on the season. And Jonathan Taylor, as you mentioned, Adam, averaged almost 6 yards a carry last week, had 85 total yards, and he got 10 carries, which, again, is neither here nor there at this point. But I say everything that I've said to say that I really think this game's a toss-up. I think it's a matter of, can Ehlinger avoid the big mistakes that Matt Ryan couldn't? That's the biggest thing. Do you put Ehlinger in a situation where you kind of get him out, out of the pocket, I guess, a little bit more, and I guess run more play action boots or option plays or what have you, that gets him outside the pocket more and prevents him from being clobbered by, I think, a really talented Washington front and a Colts offensive line, despite having multiple first round multiple top end picks along that line, being Ryan Kelly, Quentin Nelson, Braden Smith, have really underperformed this season, as we know. I think it's a matter of, as I mentioned, Ehlinger avoiding the big mistakes. And can the Colts defense, which they haven't really done for this season, Adam, it was kind of a staple of their run last year. They were second in the league in turnovers, and they have less than 10, I believe, this year total. And granted, again, I mentioned earlier how well the defense has played for Indianapolis, but you've got to do two things. You've got to create turnovers in this league, and you have to avoid self-inflicting turnovers. And those are the two things that the Colts haven't really done. And if you give Washington a short field, make no mistake, Taylor Heineke can play. He's a solid player. I think he's proven that. That's a really good Green Bay defense. Are they underperforming? Sure, but let's give credit where it's due. Taylor Heineke did his thing. Terry McLaurin against Stephon Gilmore, I think, is the matchup to watch for me on defense. Gilmore's been excellent for the Colts defense this season. Scary Terry, as they like to call him in Washington, Indiana native. Here's an interesting fact. My sister went to elementary school with Terry McLaurin, believe it or not. So interestingly enough, the Indiana native returns to his hometown, or his home state, I should say, and we'll see what that matchup looks like. But I think it's a toss-up. I'm leaning just slightly more towards Indianapolis, just because I think their defense at home can really sort of stifle this Washington rushing attack, which has been pretty solid the last couple of weeks. And I think outside of Terry McLaurin, I mean, they've got a couple of nice weapons. They've got the rookie Jahan Dotson, who's played well, and you've got Curtis Samuel. So I'm interested to see, how they perform as well. But I think Ehlinger just gives you something different. I think he provides a little bit of spark for this offense. I think it'll be low scoring. I'm going to say Colts 24, Washington 23. I think if anything, the Colts just barely eke out the win. But I think a lot of Colts fans, for the first time in a couple of weeks, are excited for Sunday's game, just because, as I mentioned, it's different. You have a quarterback that an Ehlinger that, God bless him, and I mean that sincerely. He's been through so much tragedy in his life, and he's overcome a lot of obstacles. And I pride myself on being objective as a journalist that covers the team, but I'm rooting for the kid. I really am. I hope he does well, just because of everything that he's been through and that he's had to prove. So I hope he does well. And I think I just think, Adam, this is one of those games where it can go either way. And I apologize if I'm coming off as a little redundant, but I agree. I don't think Washington scares you too much. I think they're missing a lot of key pieces. I think Colts defense, as I mentioned several times now, has done its job. I think it'll do its job again Sunday. And I think the offense with Ehlinger at the helm will do just enough to get the win.
Yeah, you were talking about the matchups. You're looking at the Gilmore-McLaurin. I'm going to point out a couple matchups that I'm not even going to really prognosticate on, but these are ones that I'll be watching in the game. Defensively, Kenny Moore against Curtis Samuel. You mentioned Samuel. He's become really kind of the go-to guy right there right now, which is a little weird, I think. Not because I think less of Curtis Samuel, but with McLaurin and Dotson, the draft capital in Dotson, and obviously Scary Terry being as good as he is, I'm a little intrigued as to why he's the go-to so much. And Kenny Moore hasn't really graded out well as a slot corner this year. So I think that's a matchup to watch. The one that really scares me or makes me concerned is the right guard position that we've talked about all year. Matt Pryor going up against Daron Payne. Payne isn't grading out exceptionally well this year, but I think that's an area over that right side between Kelly and Smith that if Daron Payne is in one of his bring in the pain moments, that's an opportunity to blow up our run game. So yeah, those are my two to watch. Andrew, what do you think about coming back maybe the Wednesday this week or so to talk about the trade deadline and anything that may have happened?
I'm all for it. I mean, we've mentioned it before. We feel very lucky to be able to do what we do and talk about the NFL. It's something that Adam and I and Cody, who wasn't able to join us today, but it's something that all three of us are extremely passionate about. And there's nothing more fun than watching the NFL trade deadline shake out. It may not have as many moves as maybe the MLB or the NBA, but so far there have been quite a few interesting trades. We'll save it for Wednesday, but I say let's do it.
Yeah, for sure. Sounds good. I'll talk to Cody, and if we're not on Factually Footballs, then we may be on Bringing the Juice with Cody and or Derek. So keep staying tuned to both of us. Appreciate you guys for following both of our podcasts, and have a good football Sunday. Remember, wake up early. London's calling. Have a good one, guys.